poker is a microcosm of life. So when you play poker, if you start thinking about it, you can learn tremendous business skills, everything from resiliency, assessing the competition, adaptability, thinking strategically, emotional intelligence. There's all sorts of wonderful things.
Welcome to the My Future Business Show, where we get you in front of your best audience and keep you there. Not only are we interviewing the biggest names in business to help you become even more successful, we're inviting you to book your spot on the show to help you grow your business. So at the end of the call, make sure you fill in the interview application form at myfuturebusiness.com/interviews. Hello and welcome back to the My Future Business Show. It's Rick Nuske here. Today, do I have somebody incredibly talented? This is a little bit left of center for what we normally talk about, but there's a very good reason, and you can apply it to not only your skills as a poker player, but your skills in business, in life, and so many other areas, and you'll understand why I say that. And with that all being said, I'd love to welcome to the show the wonderful Mr. Chuck Clayton. Welcome to the show, Chuck.
Thank you, Rick. I really appreciate being on here today.
Yeah,
and
look.
How long will we be on, just so I know, so I can...
Oh, look, you know, it goes for as long as you need to go. So we'll measure it as we go along.
Great. We'll be done within 6 to 8 hours, okay?
Well, that's it's an important thing that you mentioned there, Chuck, because this is a very deep and meaningful topic. I've been through your website, as I mentioned off the call, and, you know, there's so many different dimensions to it. There's the mindset, there's the process, there's, you know, many different ways to master poker math, which is going to be our primary topic. And just for context, Chuck, I'm going to be sharing with the audience that you have written 2 books, not one, on mastering poker math. And we're going to be talking about those and how you can use them to help you learn poker math from your good self. But before we do that, need to know a little bit about you. I'd love to spend a couple of minutes finding out a little bit of the basics. So where are you located?
Sure. I'm in Georgetown, Texas right now, and I grew up in Michigan, Lower Michigan, the Detroit area. Dearborn Heights, essentially, was the name of the place that I grew up mostly. Had wonderful parents, and unfortunately they passed away. But they were incredible influence, and it's each year I appreciate them more and
yes.
how all the things they taught me correctly to treat people right and to go after my dreams and all that other good stuff. So I went to engineering school at Michigan. I went Henry Ford Community College, then Michigan Tech University, came out with a undergraduate in mechanical engineering, and most of my career has been doing mechanical design and development. I've also been a systems engineer, a quality engineer, Six Sigma expert at Raytheon. Have worked on everything from ground support equipment at the space shuttle to rockets and missiles and bombs, and also with oil field equipment, computer equipment. So I've got a lot of different types of experiences. And when you look back, it's like, wow. But you know, at the time, you work a job, and mechanical engineering is mechanical engineering, and you'd learn the different. Once you learn the basics, you can go and do a lot of different things. So I've been very, very fortunate. I've been very fortunate to work with some incredibly intelligent people. And hopefully a little bit of it's rubbed off, at least a little bit. Anyway.
I think it has.
And so I did a charity event for the International Cancer Advocacy Network. And, well, I'll go back a little bit and how I got into this whole poker thing. And I'll try to keep it relatively short. In 2004, my sister's daughter, Claire Nelson, was diagnosed with glioma, which is a brainstem cancer. She... the International Cancer Advocacy Network, it was called something different at the time, but that doesn't, what's important is they tried to help, and unfortunately, with one of these test programs, it didn't work, and my sister's daughter passed away. But I stayed on because I really liked the person who runs it is Marsha Horn, does a phenomenal job. The International Cancer Advocacy Network helps people with late-stage cancer, and they're a 5-star charity. And the great nonprofits, just an incredible organization. So I started going to meetings and things, but I'm kind of a doer. And so I danced Argentine tango, and I did an event in 2012, and it was very successful. And we pulled in a lot of a reasonable amount of money for the charity. Again in 2014, and I came out after I left Raytheon. I came out here, and I had a friend back from Tucson and said, well, about doing a casino night. So I said, why not? I'll figure it out. And the guy I worked with said, well, why don't you do a poker tournament? So I said, okay. So how do you get people to come to the event? Well, you go to their poker tournaments. So I did what was called a free roll, and I started playing, and I really enjoyed the game. Once the charity event had completed, I continued to play, and we did more charity events for a while, and that grew, and but I was absolutely fascinated with the game. So
Yeah.
I kept taking notes. I pulled out an old statistics book from college. I just loved the mathematics of poker, and we'll get into that a little bit. But what happened was I ended up writing my first book on the math. Or not, it wasn't my first book I'd ever written, but it was a book on mathematics, and it's been very successful. It's on Amazon.com. It's now called Mastering Poker Math, and then we added the volume 1 when the second volume came out, and in this year I came up with volume 2, and that really goes deeply. The first one is basically learn the math at a visceral level and then integrate it with your game because they're so important. And the second one is to know what's called equity. You have business equity, you have home equity, well, you also have poker equity. Okay.
Yep.
And so, if you have pocket aces, I have pocket queens, your equity is 82%, which means you're going to win 82% of the time. Okay. So that's pretty straightforward. But what happens when you get a third hand and a fourth hand and all this other stuff? So it gets really complex very fast. But the game is so deep that I've tried to use practical math, and I'm really pleased and excited that I've been able to do this work. And it's helped a lot of people. So
Absolutely, I love it. I've looked at it on a cursory level because again, it is a very, very deep thing. Now, speaking of deep, is there a way that you can simplify this at all as a practitioner, somebody who takes up these books? Does it simplify the process, do you think?
Well, yes, in many ways. And let's do some examples. You have 52. Well, you played cards, correct? Or not?
Sometimes, yes.
Okay. How many cards in a deck?
52, I think.
Exactly. How many times does 52 go into 100, approximately?
Well, less than one. Oh, only
Well,
one.
twice.
Yeah, twice.
Twice.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. So that's okay. That's called the rule of 2.
Yep.
And how the rule of 2 works is, let's say you have, do you know what a straight is in poker? That means 5 in a row.
Yes.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay.
Yes.
Real simple.
Yep.
So let's say you have 5, 6 in your hand, and 3, 4 come out. So the 7 or the 2 will give you a straight, correct?
Correct.
How many cards is that?
Is it 6?
8.
8.
There's 4 and 8.
Oh, of course. Oh, because again, I don't play this too much.
No, it's okay. But there's 8 outs. And what an out means is if you get one of those cards and the straight is the best hand, then you're going to win the hand.
Right.
Okay. I mean, there's always
so many permutations. Yeah.
Somebody else, some other hands are out there and everything else. But for simplicity's sake, if you get a straight, let's say you're going to win the hand. So you have 8 outs. Well, by the rule of 2, that means you have a 16% probability of winning because 52 goes into 100 twice. It's that straightforward. Okay. That's not exact, but it's close.
That's close.
So what 16% means? Well, if somebody makes a bet of, let's say the pot is $90 and they put in 10, that makes it 100. Okay. And if it costs you 10 to get in the pot, well, I'm sorry, they have 80 and they put in 10, that's 90. It'll cost you 10 to get 100. So that means it costs you 10% of the pot. Okay.
Right. Yep.
If you're going to get 16% probability of winning, do you want to make the bet? The answer would be yes, right? Because over the long term, maybe not now, maybe not 3 times in a row, but eventually you'll do well. Okay.
Got it.
So that's how you utilize that. And then it always gets very complex at that point because implied odds. Even if it was more than 16% of the bet, then the fact that maybe you could take a lot more chips from somebody else, and so on and so forth.
You clearly you come across as somebody who has a magnificent mind, and I'm sure that the way that you teach people this makes a lot of sense. But in terms of writing the books themselves, can you share with us how long it actually took you to put these two together?
Sure. The first book, I would say, took about 1,000 hours,
Wow.
and that may or may not sound like a lot of time, but let me explain. When you're writing a book,
Mm.
um, I I was very fortunate on the first book that I wrote. I had a gentleman, Arthur Frederick Ide, who helped me, and I'll give you my background. It's pretty amazing that I actually was held back in second grade, partially because I think it was English, and then also I went to a second college to get through English because I was going to be an engineer. Oh, I won't need this, right?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I paid for that sin more times than I can tell you. And I'm serious. I went to another college just to get through the English because I'm not going to need that. As I said, sometimes you pay for your sins, and I guarantee you I paid for that sin. Instead of just trying to really study. But my skill in writing is not being a super grammar person. It's about explaining very complex uh, ideas in a
Hmm.
way that are very understandable as much as possible.
Yep. Yeah,
You
that's
can't make
wonderful.
it simple.
No,
I
I
think,
love it. You know, there's certain topics that you just can't skirt around the complexities of it, and by definition, poker is a complex game. Now, I would love to just quickly, if we could, talk a little bit about. We know what your hobby slash sport is. It's poker by and large, but I also know that on your website, and I've done my research because I think it's important, that you do reference a movie called Moneyball. Are movies a thing for you? Do you enjoy watching movies?
oh, I love watching movies. Well, I'm glad you brought up Moneyball
Yep.
because after I finished my first book, I had stuff in there I answered questions. I sit at the poker table and somebody say, I hate pocket jacks. I hate pocket jacks. And you would hear this so many, just ridiculous number of times. So I said, okay, let's do the math of pocket jacks, right? And I'm coming around to your question. If it's okay, I've
Yeah, yeah,
taken a
yeah.
minute.
No, that's all right.
So with pocket jacks, I ran the mathematics, and if there's 9 people at a table and 1 or 2 people have an ace, king, or queen, okay, 1 to 3 people, or 2 to 3 people, I'm sorry, then the probability of an ace, king, or queen still hitting the flop, okay, the next 3 cards that come out, is still 62%. So there's a good reason to hate pocket jacks for some people. So they overbet them, they lose half their stack, and then they complain about the pocket jacks instead of just playing them correctly, which is make a bet, but don't expect it to be the best hand at the end of the hand.
Yep, yep,
It's and so that type of thing in the first book. But I kept afterwards. I had a spark that ended up only being a paragraph or two in the book, which was fascinating. Which was I was curious about if you have a pocket pair, what's the probability somebody else has one? Well, it turns out to be a Monte Carlo simulation. It's really complex and it's not absolutely necessary for the book,
yep.
but I kept writing it. And the second book, I was almost done in November of last year, or so I thought, and had about 700 hours in the book. But I found something called Grammarly to help me with the grammar.
Oh, yes, very familiar with
And
that.
yes, good. And what happened was that plus the fact that I kept smoothing it out. Think of something as smooth as silk, but it's got all these bumps and lumps and hairs and everything else you got to get rid of. And so I didn't release the book till August of this year. And I put in another 700, 800 hours. So that book has about 1,500 hours in it. But I'm extremely proud of it because it gets back to Moneyball. As I kept going, why wasn't this done before? And then I saw the movie Moneyball again, and it's with Brad Pitt. And Brad Pitt he plays Billy Bean, which is the general manager of the Oakland Athletics. Well, he meets a guy named he got spanked. I guess I believe it was 2001. Well, it was a 2011 movie, but anyway, in 2001 he got spanked, and he went into he was pretty depressed after the season, and they only had a certain amount of money to be able to buy new, buy players and everything. Okay,
Yep, yep,
so but he met a guy named Peter Brand, who was a statistics guy
yep.
from Yale, and they got together and economics. I'm sorry, graduate from Yale, and they had radical ideas, which was instead of paying for the best players, pay for the players who'd help you win the most games.
Yep.
To get on base, to run away, even if some guy would get on base because of the fact that, he stood a little too close to the plate or whatever. It mattered that consistently, statistically, that you would get runs. Okay.
Yep.
And so they started a rough season next year, but they ended up breaking a record of over 20 game wins. Okay. And they went on to the American League Division Series, and they played against the Minnesota Twins. They lost, but they achieved, in 2002, using the mathematics, that, winning games with a budget was possible.
It was possible,
Well,
yeah.
a guy named John Henry, who was the owner of the Boston Red Sox, pulls Billy Beane aside and says, would you work for us? Now, he declined the offer, but if he had taken it, it was like $12.5 million. He'd been the highest paid general manager. Now, I think he's a little crazy, and I'm not sure why he refused, but it was something inside of him that he was committed to the team or something. I don't know, but it was interesting. Anyway, Boston Red Sox put it in, and in 2004, they won the World Series, and they hadn't won in 86 years. They called it the curse of the Bambino, because when the Boston Red Sox had sold Babe Ruth back 86 years ago, they'd never won a World Series since then.
Yeah.
So until then, so the so-called curse of the Bambino was finally, vanquished, right? And
Broken,
if that's the right word. So the moral of the story is that in huge industries, even like baseball or poker, sometimes there's something missing. There's a huge gap, and the gap in the poker math, I thought it should have been done 20 years ago, but nobody just sat there and really pontificated it like I have. Okay. And that's not to say other people aren't capable or anything else, but so many people, even some of the top players, they just don't get the fact of how the mathematics can be utilized. Now, I've not won any major championships and things like this, but I do understand at a very visceral level. I can even tell you, if you're playing in front of me, what you potentially have been dealt. And in times when I'm in a betting routine, that helps me make a decision based on the mathematics plus based what I know about you as a player. So it's a little bit of an edge. It's not a huge edge, but it helps with the confidence, and where you can say, well, I think, it doesn't feel like this, but you know it by the mathematics. So you can accelerate the skills in the game much quicker than you ordinarily could.
So this is all above board legitimate strategies. This is not like counting cards or anything like that. I don't really even understand what that term means. Is that part of it, or how does that come into this picture?
Well, yeah. Well, let's go back to counting cards. Counting cards is in blackjack or 21.
Right.
And that is a very legitimate thing. There's a movie out called 21. And it's based off a book called Bringing Down the House. And I actually have that story in my second book when I talk about future probabilities, because what happened was an MIT professor got together with a bunch of the students, and they smashed Vegas for about 5 years by going out and counting cards. And what they did was, think of density, okay?
Yep.
And you have, aces, kings, queens, jacks, tens, right? A certain density. And by counting the number of higher cards that are coming out, and I don't remember the exact number, but at some point it means that the density that's coming out means that the probability that the next cards, when you're playing, are going to be a certain number of cards. By knowing those probabilities, you can make bets instead of you make all these smaller bets until they had these hand signals or whatever, or facial ticks or whatever the heck they were, and then they would change and make larger bets, and they would win. And out of 5 years, like the one of the story in the actual book, personally, I don't like the movie that much. It's too Hollywood.
Yep.
And I really like, but I love the mathematics behind it. And what happened was, in 5 years, my understanding that they got 30% on their investors every single year consistently. Wow. And it was, there was, there's always human emotion, everything else in there. And so you get full of your own self and things. And I watch that type of stuff a lot in any type of game. But the bottom line was, now they have card counters and things like this, so you can't count cards. Now, Texas Hold'em is totally different because you're not playing against the house. When I go to play a tournament, whether it's in a casino or whether it's in a card house like we have here in Texas, you pay a certain amount to enter the tournament, right? So they already have the casino already has their money. When I'm counting cards, it's basically I know what the probabilities are. If I have 2 flush cards or 2 hearts in my hand and there's 2 hearts on the board, I know there's 9 hearts out there, then it can help me make my flush. And if I have an ace of hearts and another card, I know that I will have the nut flush, which means I will win the hand as long as the board isn't paired. If the board is paired, then there could be a full house, okay?
Yep.
But so if I know there's 9 cards out there, you remember the rule of 2 again? So what percentage is that?
Can't remember.
9 times 2 is
18.
exactly 18% probability. So that means if somebody makes a bet of let's say 200 into a 800 800 pot, okay, that if they make a 2 into 600 and then it costs me 200, which is 20%, so I'm basically getting almost even money, okay? And again, if you there's a whole bunch of equities, and you have fold equity, and you also have and you have the thing here is like implied odds, okay? Even if you don't have the odds to make the bet, if you get the card you want, you might be able to take part of or all the other person's stacks. So you think about that. But that's where the game is really complex, and that makes it fun.
I can tell you, I can tell this is a passionate thing for you, especially given the mission and where this all came from. I think that's critically important for everybody to remember. It's not just about going out there for greed or anything like that. There's a real mission behind what you're doing, and now helping others to be better players is obviously part of that bigger mission. Now, you mentioned earlier when you play tournaments and you go to certain places, what I had a thought was, and it's an interesting one, is that you would become known. You would almost have relationships with these places that you play at. How does that work when they start to know you? They know the face and they know, here he comes again. What do you think their response is?
Well, it's actually very positive. Where I play at the lodge here in Round Rock, Texas, their people are very, I'm extremely well known because they know I play. And I play extremely solid, and they know that they better be careful. I had a gentleman the other day, he was sitting to the left of me, which is a better position to be in, okay, than the
after.
And so I'm sorry, no, he was to the left. I'm sorry, that's a worse position. But he said to me at one point, I think he might even had more chips than me, but I had a really good hand, and somehow his spider sense says, "No, I'm not going to get it in this hand." I know you're asleep. You're going to set a trap, and he was absolutely correct. This is exactly what I was doing. It was, and I told him, and I've told other people. I've had people say, "I knew you were doing that." When I beat somebody. And I go, the show wasn't for you. It was customized for this other person. I don't care what you think as long as you don't say anything. If I've got a weak player, then I'm going to play it differently than if I have a strong player. A strong player is going to see through certain things, and weak players, you just there's magical things you can do. And one of the most fun things is to trap somebody. Well, they never see it coming. He goes, how did you have that hand? Well, that's, next time I'll tell you,
Well, I might be able to educate you. You might need to buy my books. You talked about spidey senses, and the word intuition came up. Do you think that's important in this whole dimension?
It's incredibly, if I had to go between the math and the intuition, in some ways, and almost say the intuition, it's really tough. And because you can't just, tournaments are different than cash. And I just started playing cash a little bit ago. I probably spent only 1 or 2% of my time on cash. And the reason is because when I was writing the books, I had to be very pure in my mind. I was concerned if I played cash that it was going to pollute my mind. And I didn't want that, where I start thinking of scenarios where this wouldn't work. And if you're trying to explain a subject at the depth that I was, you want to be careful to it. They're both applicable, but let's say in a cash game, for example. Now, it's helped me when I play cash because when I see somebody make a bet, usually in poker, after the very first rounds, they get pretty crazy. But when it's a decent sized game and it's let's say a couple $100 to get into, there's still some players that after the first couple of rounds, they'll still go 5 to 10 times the big blind when they make a bet. When they do that, I almost immediately know they're a cash player. So that tells me something about them and how they play.
Uh-huh.
Cash players will risk way more on very simple hands. So these become key people that you can potentially trap. Okay.
Yeah.
So you just become very passive. And if you hit the hand you want, sometimes you can take them out of a tournament or really get a huge number of their chips, if that makes sense.
Yes.
People communicate all the time. Mostly it's through their betting, and sometimes their betting, the way they handle their chips, the way they, the speed of how they, move their chips are the primary things. People can wear sunglasses all day long, and I actually will wear semi-sunglasses because just to keep, to give a little more, because the glare of any type of glasses helps distract just a little bit. But some people that wear the dark sunglasses and everything, they don't pay attention to the sizing of their bet and how fast they bet, which communicates much more than you're going to ever see in the eyes. When you see somebody in the eyes, the only thing I can usually gain is an intuition type of thing, and I can't even tell you what it just instincts tell me that the person is weak or strong. And it's hard to even put it into words, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but there's a couple of things that come from this. One is your strategy on the day. Do they change? But also, are there days where you feel a bit off and that you maybe even talk about in your book to not play? Are there those times?
I don't go into that a lot, but absolutely. I mean, I played last Sunday and I played extremely solid and I got a good stack size, and it's really easy sometimes to lose focus. To gain too much confidence. And in poker, I have seen so many times where people absolutely, what's the name of it? They, self-delusion is huge in poker. And I try to stay away from that. I'll give you an example in a minute, but I didn't all day. And I ended up taking like 8 out of 97. So it was a good day. That was Sunday.
Yep.
But I'll give you an example of one poker tournament. If you have a pocket pair, there's only a 12% probability that a third card will hit. If it does, then you got an extremely strong hand, and it's extremely well disguised because people can't see it. So let's say Jack 5-2 hits the flop. Seems like a very dry flop. If somebody has an ace Jack, they think they're way ahead. And the person who has pocket fives has 3 of a kind right now with the potential for a boat on the next card, right? So, which is a full house. I'm sorry. If I say anything,
no, that's okay. That makes sense.
So what happens is I watched this guy, and the hand went to showdown. He bet a third of his stack to stay in it, and he ended up doubling up. And afterwards, he was arrogant, throwing chips in the pot, thinking that he's a good player. And I knew that he was super lucky on what happened to him.
Yep.
And it was like this communicated volumes to me on the type of player he was. That he was out of his league in this game. It was a big game. It was a $600 game. And in my humble opinion, he should have been back in the $100, $200 games when he was playing like this. And it was a big tournament, but so many of them think it's luck. And yeah, in that time he got lucky, but we were right near the bubble, were they bagging that night? And so you paid $600 in the tournament, and if you bagged, you got $800 bonus, right?
Yep.
So he was right near there, and risking that much,
Wow.
For that little. That's just not understanding the mathematics.
Now, Chuck, you've talked in various terminologies, and I think it's important that we shift our focus coming to the sharper, pointy end of the call of what's actually going to be found by those who are interested in getting their hands on these wonderful books. What are some of the things inside that we can expect to see?
Well, the first book is to give a huge understanding and appreciation for the mathematics, the practical mathematics, not some theoretical. I do actually, my second book, I call it theory, but it's actually practical.
Yep.
It's, it's the, that, so it's
They're need to knows rather than nice to knows.
right, right. And I work with the need to knows as much as possible. So you could, if you read the book and you could memorize it immediately, you could use it immediately at the tables.
Right.
So that's one of the goals that I have. And so that the first book is learning the math viscerally, and then also gaining an understanding of utilizing with the rest of your game. Because a lot of the math stuff that's out there, they don't do that, in all due respect. There's some good stuff out there, and I'm not going to go. There's another gentleman who has a really good book, and I kind of like this first book a little more than the second one, because the second one, it was expanded, but he never really got into the other parts of the game. And to me, it's, just knowing the math is no way enough. You've got to put it with the rest. So I was very careful. And then the second book, it's even though, the first book, you have a real strong understanding of math, it goes even deeper in the mathematics and on a level to become basically what's your equity, and think of equity as ownership, like we mentioned before. If you have pocket aces or another cards, or you have multiple players, what's your approximate equity, and then what is your risk assessment? Okay, because there's always risk in poker, right? You make
anything in life, isn't there?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you've got let's say you have an ace, and or you're in a big poker tournament. And I mean, I'm giving an extreme example, but you have an ace, and there on the board is ace, ace, 5, 5, 4. Okay, and you think you have the absolute nuts, which means you can't lose. Well, there's one hand that can beat you, and that is pocket fives.
Yep.
and that is incredibly rare, and almost no player, hardly that is. If somebody can fold that, I might be able to do that in a certain type of tournament with a certain type of player. Okay.
Yep.
But if I had pocket aces, I'd know there one other ace, and the person would probably play, if they had an ace, the same way they'd play if they had the pocket fives. So if they're a good player, you'd never know the pocket fives, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's an extreme example, but as a player, you need to know what could beat you so that you don't, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
But it's risk, and it's calculated risk, and
Yep.
and going out with the full house like that in a tournament, almost any tournament is very respectable, even the highest paying tournaments in the world. Okay.
Yep.
And no pro would, if the other person played the quads correctly, almost no pro would ever, insult the person that wasn't able to fold. I mean, because you probably shouldn't fold.
I see here, this really brings all of the other dimensions to playing poker properly. We've talked about intuition, we've talked about understanding mathematics, we've talked about risk assessments, confidence, probabilities. This, to me, the book seems to be more like a gateway tool, a resource that people can start to learn more about this. But I suspect that there's going to be almost a relationship that they need to build with someone like you to learn more. Do you work with people? How can people work with you to get more help to learn how to play properly?
Well, they can, more than happy to contact me through my email. I can give that to you. And if I work with somebody, I definitely prefer that they read my books first, because I don't want to, it's not inexpensive, but I want to make sure that the person gets something out of it. Okay.
Yep.
And I don't want, and the same way as for your program, I don't want to waste my time either. Okay.
No.
I don't want to teach somebody some of the very basics when I can guide them to a book. If they're asking me about the rule of 2 and 4 and how to count outs and things like that, they should know that. What they should be asking me is, I'm in this situation and I'm third from last, and somebody makes a bet and I didn't know what to do. So I just start asking them the same questions. How large is your stack? What time is, where is in the tournament? What type of player has this been? Okay. What type of tournament is this? What, and I start asking all, and it's always the same questions. And after a while, it's like, oh, I get them to think for themselves,
Yeah.
so I'm kind of trying to work myself out of a job. I know that sounds crazy, but that's the way it is.
No,
Okay.
that's you're getting to a finite end, and I like that. You're not just trying to sap out more money and all the rest of it. You're trying to actually help people become better players. That's the ultimate goal here. Now, I know that you have a number of different areas on your website, but when people get to your website, one, what is it, and two, what are they going to find when they get there?
Well, my website is www.masteringpokermath.com. And it's, which is the name of my books also. So if you go to Amazon, you can find them under Mastering Poker Math Volume 1 and Volume 2.
Mm-hmm.
And on there I have the books. And then if you're more of an audio visual kinesthetic type person, then I have a course on there, and it's an excellent course. It's a little over 5 hours, and that'll take you through, and then you go all these tests and everything else, and that can really help somebody if they, because some people just don't like books that much. But that is audio visual, and then you take tests, and then you can, you have access to it for at least 6 months, so that's great. The other thing before I forget, Rick, that I want to mention
Yes.
is that poker, and I've given a couple presentations on this, and I keep the other part of this, if anybody has a company or a organization that they want me to speak at, because poker is a microcosm of life, and it's of the real world, okay? And it's kind of a gymnasium of the mind. So there's things that when you play poker, if you start thinking about it, you can learn tremendous business skills, everything from resiliency, assessing the competition, adaptability, thinking strategically, emotional intelligence. There's all sorts of wonderful things. And poker has also been utilized before in military skills. Some of the people who are some of the top chess players have come over to poker, more so than people going from poker to chess. And the reason for that is there's a lot more, for all the brain power it takes to do chess, there's a lot more money in poker, right? So it's kind of a one-way street, and that kind of makes sense. I mean, this, chess is an incredible game as well. I've only played a little bit, but, in the years past, but I played for a little bit, but nothing in competition.
Too serious. Yep.
Yeah. So
I can see what you're saying here. I mean, there's an expanded audience here, and this is particularly relevant to the My Future Business audience you're suggesting.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, look, if you are on today's call, we have literally just scratched the surface on this very deep topic. If you want to learn more, the first step forward to work with Chuck is to visit his website at masteringpokermath.com. I'll be providing that link for you so you can go have a look at his website. There's a lot of information on there. I really enjoyed looking through this website myself, Chuck. And with all that being said, thank you so very much for joining me on the My Future Business show today.
Rick, thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us today. If you enjoyed the call, then make sure to subscribe, leave a comment, share us with your friends, and book your spot on the show at myfuturebusiness.com/interviews. And if you're looking for solutions that will help grow your business, then visit myfuturebusiness.com/shop.